Thank you, Jonathan. Jack Heath, Monday morning J-Dog on the boards. And let's start with Mother Nature before we get to the latest on the Middle East. Busy week at the State House and gas prices, but we'll come back to that in 1 second, as well as overwork and stressed out TSA workers with heightened terrorism threat and concerns. Does that make sense? They're not getting paid during this partial government shutdown. Finally, we have Mother Nature weighing in here at home. We are into the warmer stuff, temperature into the 60s the next few days, and it is welcome. I already talked to someone who had a nice walk on the beach this morning. It's going to feel like sweater weather, and it's been a while, so enjoy it. Our poll question up on X here at the Pulse of an H. Simply put, this morning on the Pulse of an H, our poll question on X, do you think the price of gas here at home will reach $4 a gallon? I can't believe I'm saying that. Just a few weeks ago or a couple weeks ago when you're filling up, it was, I don't know, I remember once it was like $2.50, $2.60, $2.70 a gallon. Media certainly is covering this one, but we're feeling it in our pockets at a time when things are still expensive, and we'll come back to that as well. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, worldwide, play the Pulse of an H. And I'll come back to some commentary and the latest on the Middle East, as well as the State House here a little bit later on. Anna Brown, Citizens Count, busy week locally, a busy week overall. And by the way, welcome to some warmer weather. Last week, we were able to bring in, and I'm delighted because he is a phenomenal local expert. He's a retired fighter pilot, lives in Durham. And Tim Hafner joining us back on the show. 10 years, as they say, in the box as a fighter pilot before he went on the commercial airline side of things. And Tim is nice enough to join us again as our own Pulse of NH. Good Morning New Hampshire Pulse of NH military expert. And who knows better than a fighter pilot on observations of what's going on in the Middle East and in Iran. Tim, thanks for being back with us.
Good morning, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Thanks. I kind of wanted to keep it general for a moment and, just to talk to you about tactical aviation and how it's changing. It's very unrecognizable, I know, from a long time ago, but you're someone now in the private sector as a former fighter pilot living right in Durham, New Hampshire, and we appreciate your being on as an expert, and thank you for your service. We're getting into, we're getting into the second full week of this. I guess if you go back to a week ago Saturday, if I'm right, here we are on Monday. The president's saying, we're going to expect more. I know this thing isn't wrapped up yet, but from a tactical point of view, from our fighters in the sky, our refuelers out of peace, how do you think it's going in terms of strategic sites and what we're trying to do in terms of hitting those sites? How do you think as a fighter pilot this is going?
There's a couple of ways to look at this. The military that Iran has is extensive. They've been supported by the Russians. They've been supported by the Chinese. They've got some really good weapon systems. So you can't just barge in there and do whatever you want. It takes a lot of planning, and a lot of talent, and a lot of skill. So what it looks like they're doing is they're pushing slowly eastward as they go in and take the systems out. And they've also got to be really aggressive about things that Iran can shoot back, because what they're trying to break up the coalition, and I think it's going against them, but by hitting targets for a lot of the countries that are around there, and sort of break up what the U.S. and Israel are trying to accomplish. So you've got the first wave where you've got to go in and take down the anti-aircraft weapon systems, but then you also have to be able to take down the ballistic missiles and the drone launch sites and all that. So, I mean, it's an incredibly complicated situation that they're trying to navigate. The thing that's super impressive to me right now is I'm just thinking back about when I was in the cockpit. I mean, I was in an airplane. It was cutting edge at the time. And yet the amount of information I had in the cockpit compared to what they have now is just, it almost seems like a toy looking backwards, because the F-35 specifically, the F-22 has got this, and they're updating the new aircraft. Everything is talking to everything. So you've got data sources coming in from all of these different places. And the picture that the pilot has in the cockpit of what's going on is so comprehensive, and it's allowing them to do things we couldn't have even dreamed of, a few decades back.
Yeah. How about the changes? You were talking, Tim Hafner is a local retired former fighter pilot in Durham. How tactical aviation has changed even since when you were flying an F-16 or I guess the F-16, F-18 class. How has it changed?
Hey, we talked a little bit about this last week. The accuracy has gone up significantly. They're dropping GPS guided bombs that I think are much more accurate. There's going to be laser guided stuff that's incredibly accurate. You're able to go in, we would go, a standard go to war load for us might be 5 or 6 500-pound bombs. They're going to go in with 2 and do much more surgical damage than we could have done.
Right.
And we were just starting to see the waves of that when I was in, but now there's so much of it. The majority of it is they're hitting what they're aiming. I mean, there's always going to be collateral. I don't think there's any way to avoid that. But the collateral damage, I think, is going way down because they're hitting what they're aiming at.
Yep. What about the one thing I don't think we realize in living here in New Hampshire, we can see that through the refueling mission at Pease is the coordination across the board, because you mentioned last time you were on, Tim Hafner, that keeping those planes and fighter jets mechanically at top notch, the technology, the refueling, the support, the other aircraft that would support a F-35 flying, or how about I don't know how to say it. It's not morale of our fighter pilots, but energy levels. I know you trained for this. You train, they're on high alert. But do you feel that they're kind of hitting on top gear, or as this drags out, is there some wear and tear and strain in areas that would concern you?
Well, the answer is yes. There's nothing like the big show to get you ramped up, right? So, what I've seen historically is it's called FMC, fully mission capable rates. It's how many airplanes you can get airborne, how many systems are up running, and all that. It tends to go up when the shooting starts because people are just amped and they're working harder and they're so much more motivated. So you do see, the maintainers are just phenomenal. They're so good at what they do, and then you put the adrenaline on top of that, and they just take it up to a whole nother level, and that goes all the way through for everybody. And you start seeing people do, where they're going to stay well away from the edge in peacetime because you don't want to bend an airplane, you don't want to, that kind of stuff. When the shooting starts, you're going to push the edges more because the mission's got to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't matter what kind of day you're having. The bomb has to hit the target.
Do we, I know it's an intelligence thing, as you said, and a lot of this is intel, and there's nothing better than good intel. There's probably nothing worse than bad intel, but do you feel that we are hitting the key critical command center communications, weaponry, and maybe even nuclear enrichment targets from what you're seeing as a bystander, like any one of us?
Yeah.
Are we doing the damage? Are we doing the damage that we think we might be doing against the regime and the capabilities? You mentioned they have a lot of capabilities, the Iranian, Guard, or, the ruling Islamic State and the new ruler. Do you think we're really causing, almost permanent damage, if you will, on our targets?
The sense that I get is they're hitting the targets the way that they want to and in the order and at the rate. But it's a big country. That's it. You watch the video, and the video is so impressive as they're hitting the targets. But then you start looking at how much the square mileage that they've got to cover, and all of the things that they've got to go after, and it's just going to take time. So I think we live in a world of instant gratification.
Well, we do,
and that's just not realistic when you look at what actually needs to get done and how much area you've got to cover. it's not a quick process, and then you've got an entire culture. We're hoping that on the backside of this, we've got an Iranian culture that is more favorable towards the rest of the Middle East than the U.S. But I mean, you got to switch an entire nation to do that. You don't do that by just taking out one or two leaders.
Well, it's interesting, Tim. I think that last point in my commentary coming up next, Tim Hafner, retired fighter pilot, regular military expert with us here, and I appreciate it, Tim, is you hit the nail squarely on the head, sir, because that's what I'm feeling this morning. I think the mid and long-term gain are certainly there from terrorism in the world and safety and nuclear stuff in the Middle East, but there's a short-term, short attention span public that the president and administration have to close the sale with, and I don't think anyone really wants a protracted war in the Middle East, and I don't think time is on our side in terms of the public sentiment when you see gas going up 50 cents a gallon, oil up to $103 a barrel. We're a very short attention society, and my worry here is if the long-term work goes beyond another week or two, I think you're going to start seeing public support drop off quicker than the president and the administration may want to see. And that this has happened in many, many wars in the past that we've engaged in as a country. Keeping the public on board is not the easiest thing to do, right?
Yeah. Everybody's a fan until it hits them in the wallet.
Yeah,
right?
You just hit the nail on the head. All right, Tim. Thank you. Make it a good Monday. Enjoy the warmer temperatures.
Thanks, Jack. You too.
All right, we come back. We'll talk about gas prices and a lot more, and the economy. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google. Play the Pulse of Age. Back in a moment. What's the number one health issue?
Staters get their news and information. This is the Pulse of New Hampshire. It's Good Morning New Hampshire with Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, a lot going on, and well, at least we have warmer weather here at home. Good morning, welcome to Monday, March 9th. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Our network of AM and FM news talk stations up in the Maine, seacoast of New Hampshire, Lakes region. We have you blanketed and covered. A couple of FMs up there as well. AM's 107.7 FM as well. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. I do want to comment on a couple stories that seem pretty clear to me, and one of them is the mess now at the airports unfolding, and that's the TSA and the lines. And this is a busy travel period, as you know, and has been the last few weeks, but I don't think people understand why this is not more national news is well beyond me. If you look back, a well-informed friend of mine this morning was telling me TSA agents, they're the front line of security at the airports for people entering and getting on a plane. And this informed friend of mine this morning shared this with me. We, since the beginning of the fiscal year, because of Congress and politics, namely, I'm just going to say it, among Democrats that have been wanting to shut the government down partially or full, TSA agents have only been paid about 40% of the time. And right now they're not getting paid. And how moronic is it that we're at a state of heightened security and terrorism concerns domestically with what's going on in the Middle East, and we're not even paying the people we're asking to be more diligent and protect our family and loved ones on airplanes? Does something seem wrong to you on that? The average, I keep pointing this out, the average salary of a TSA agent without overtime is about $65,000 a year. The average pay of a member of Congress is closer to $200,000 a year, and they're still getting paid, the members of Congress. And our TSA workers, look at the lines. Look at the stories of the TSA lines coming out of the weekend. They are getting stressed out and overworked, tired, and not getting paid. Can you imagine if we had public safety crisis at home and we're telling our police officers and EMTs to go and firefighters to go out there, save the public, risk your own life, and you're not getting paid? What do you think the morale would be? I think it would suck. What do you think? I think it would be not too good. I don't like hypocrisy. And I don't know why. And this is why very few people are watching mainstream media television news anymore, because they don't ask these questions. You know, you can lead the news tonight. And being a former news director in television, I can tell you how subjective headlines are and lead stories are. You could lead World News Tonight, ABC, David Muir tonight at 6 p.m. or whatever time it airs anymore. I don't watch it anymore, which is sad to say. You could lead the news tonight with gas prices have risen 50 cents since the attack on Iran, oil over $100 a barrel. Or you could lead the news tonight with danger at our airports, increasing security lines, a tired and frustrated TSA force not getting paid amid higher security alerts. We're going to go now live to Capitol Hill and ask Senator Chuck Schumer if he thinks that's a good idea. How are these members of Congress that are keeping the partial government shutdown and not paying people like TSA agents, how are they going to feel when, God forbid, there's an explosion or some nut job gets through a line with a weapon on an airplane that's full of passengers coming back from Orlando? How are those members of Congress, and they could be from New Hampshire, going to justify that? They need to end the partial government shutdown now. And to not do so is not only dangerous and selfish politically and cowardly, in my opinion, but it's all over midterm politics. And now's not the time to fight that on March 9th, 2026, when we have heightened concerns at the airport and a tired, frustrated TSA. You know, in the private sector, it's illegal to make people work and not pay them on time. The friend I referred to earlier Also pointed out last year, he asked me, he goes, how many guns do you think TSA seized at airports, even if it was innocently and someone forgot it was in one of their carry bags or toilet kit, or they honestly, didn't know they were carrying a gun, or they tried to do it illegally and take a gun on a plane. How about 5,000? 5,000 is the number, he said. 5,000 last year. And you're asking this group of TSA workers to keep diligent, pay attention, work harder, and you're not paying them. But you're paying yourself in Congress. End it now before it's too late. Commentary 603-228-2080. So real quickly, we just had Tim Hafner on, that retired fighter pilot right here from Durham, New Hampshire, our own military fighter pilot expert on the Pulse of an H. And he said something at the end of his interview. And it's something I'm concerned about. And it's hard to make it succinct, but I will. The challenge President Trump and the administration have right now, even if the mid to long-term gains of wiping out the threat of terrorism and nuclear weapons in a terrorist regime, the number one terrorist regime in Tehran and Iran, is worth it. The problem is the short-term impatience of the American people. And when people start to feel this in the pocketbook and the pump, and gas prices are getting into the mid threes and looking at $4 a gallon, people lose their you-know-what real fast. And you could say it's a small price to pay for long-term peace in the Middle East. I'm not saying that this was not a bad regime or it wasn't worth taking out the Ayatollah. I'm saying if our fighter pilot expert from New Hampshire is correct, and it's going to take longer than people can maybe support or feel good about at home to continue hitting targets in Iran, and if the Strait of Hormuz, in all due respect to the president, when the president says to tankers and oil tankers, take the risk, the strait is safe, go ahead and travel through it. And the president says this in all due respect, that's a naive statement. It's a long, narrow strait, a long, narrow canal, if you will. These ships are big. And if there's any threat of a heat-seeking missile or drone hitting a full oil tanker in the Middle East, the carrier, the insurance company, the owner of those tankers are not going to risk it. So they're not going to go through. And you could say they should, but they're in business in all due respect. Many of them are in international business. A fifth of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. A fifth. And you're already seeing the impact. Now, I know the president and the administration and the DOE can release emergency reserves, but if gas prices get up near $4 a gallon, the one thing you can always say is when gas prices and daily consumption at a time when it's already expensive to go to the grocery store, when things are wicked expensive, it still seems. The administration is balancing the patience or the impatience of the American people in the pocketbook and wallet with a war in the Middle East that was not going to be prolonged. So I'm not advising the president. I'm not in the war room. I'm not in the cabinet room. But I would say that the United States needs to coordinate like they've done so well with Israel and wrap this thing up from a military point of view pretty darn quick, if they can, and get back to some more normalcy. So the Strait of Hormuz is falling. People are not getting up near $4 a gallon. And that's what I sense is the real challenge here. That is the juggernaut right there. Some more commentary. We'll come back. We're going to see if Doug Tengden, World Market Advisor, is going to go a little bit earlier this morning on oil prices, the economy, the markets. Of course, they've been down since this thing started. And one thing markets don't like is uncertainty. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Jack Heath, J-Dog on the boards. Back in a moment.
This is the You're listening to Good Morning New Hampshire with Jack Heath on the Pulse of New Hampshire.
All right, we're also streaming on YouTube. The first hour of the show at the Pulse of an H. Everything with us is at the Pulse of an H, including our poll question up on X this morning. And it goes right to the direct impacts of the military operations in the Middle East and Iran and Strait of Hormuz. And that is, do you think that we could be seeing $4 a gallon in gas soon? Yes or no? J-Dog, results from Friday.
Was Kristi Noem's firing from the DHS justified? 73.3% saying yes, 26.7% saying no.
All right, that's a good one in terms of a survey poll question. Doug Tengden, World Market Advisors, going a little bit early with all the economic news. Price of a barrel of oil now over $100 a gallon, 50-cent increase in gas. Doug, I'm going to let you update us in the markets, and I know they don't like uncertainty, but I do see a real concern here, not just on the pocketbooks and the wallets of the American people. And I'm going to let you maybe touch upon it, but we had a fighter pilot on the show this morning, retired, who was here in New Hampshire, and he said this is not an easy place in Iran to take out all the potentially dangerous military sites. It's not something you can do on just a few missions, and it's going to take a while. I don't know if the American people have a while in their pocketbooks and wallets. And it's a little different than taking out the leader, which we did, the Ayatollah and his command. But, kind of finishing this thing could take longer than the American patience or consumer pocketbook wallet patience, especially at the pump, the markets, and impact on even things like fertilizer not getting through the Strait of Hormuz, which affects food prices. So, Doug, there's a balance there of time and impatience, but markets and energy markets are soaring, right?
Absolutely. We've got $100 Brent oil, maybe 110 by the end of the week, and that's gonna affect prices at the pump. I haven't voted on your poll yet, but I will after I get off the phone. This is similar to the shock after Russia invaded Ukraine, and we cut off Russian oil, and Russia, was producing 10 million barrels a day, and the oil prices spiked then. They're spiking now, and they spiked a little bit further than they did when they cut off Russia, because, of course, more oil goes through the Straits of Hormuz than came out of Russia.
Yeah. Well, do you mind sharing with us? Do you think people should brace for $4 a gallon in the short term for gas here at home?
I think it's quite possible. I think the thing about energy, remember, is it's spiky. And so prices did spike up after Russia invaded Ukraine, and that war is still ongoing. And yet they managed to move back down pretty quickly because there's a great supply response. The thing about the Straits of Hormuz, sure, you can't go around the Straits of Hormuz, but there are other sources of oil than just in the Straits of Hormuz. So in the long run, higher prices will lead to more production. It's just that it could take some time, and there could be some dislocation.
How much time? I know you're not a public policy planner, more on the economic side, World Market Advisors, but from an economic market point of view, Doug, let me just be very candid. When we were talking about Iran, getting an agreement with Iran, we were talking about taking Maduro out of Venezuela. A lot of people are saying, can you please focus on the economy? We want relief in the grocery store. We want relief for everyday consumer prices. And the president seemed to respond and go to Pennsylvania. And I remember this stuff, talk about the economy. And a lot of people feel we didn't vote for this ticket to be warmongers and fight a war unless we had to. And some people are going to question, I think most people had Senator Jeanne Shaheen on my show last week, and she supported taking out the Ayatollah, bad guy. And I'd support capturing Maduro, #1 narco drug terror person, good stuff. But getting involved in a war is a different equation, both with Congress and the American people. And you see where I'm going with that.
Yes. And it has the potential to have a larger impact on the economy. $100 oil, call it $4 at the pump. I think $4 is I don't want to prejudice your poll, but it's not an unreasonable conclusion with the $100 crude oil. And as a result, I mean, that will be demand destructive. That will hurt the economy. The good news is that it is likely to result in lower interest rates. It's likely to result in a more aggressive Fed, because the Fed is going to take that into account. They're going to look through the short-term inflation and say, what's this going to do to the economy? The other thing we haven't talked about is Friday's employment report, which was a uniformly weak number. We've talked for months about how I think the employment market is brittle. It continues to slide and not reaccelerate, and that's not what the administration was looking for. It's not what we were hoping for. But it's not a surprise, given the shock that we've seen to import prices from the tariffs, the shock we've seen to employment from the border policies, and the shock that's come from federal spending growing at 10% to basically flat. Federal spending has essentially been flat. We've had 3 shocks, and the economy has held up remarkably well, mainly on the capital spending that's come from AI and these massive data centers and massive power demands from AI. But, that could only go so long, and having $100 oil on the other side isn't going to help.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a real concern. The other thing, and you know this from economic planning, some people have said that China has a long-term view. Other people say countries in the Middle East have a long-term view, and that's not always good, believe me. But America, we are a short-term society. When I'm just going to be very candid with you, Doug, because we have time. Doug Tengden, worldmarketadvisors.com. When we have a blizzard, and we've had a lot of snow this winter, and not as much as the South Shore of Boston or beyond in terms of power outages. But when we lose power and electricity from a snowstorm or Mother Nature here, people get pretty impatient fast if they can't get on that smartphone or turn on the lights. We're a very short, fast attention span society. I'm amazed. We forget what we were talking about a week ago, and that's not good either. But if $4 a gallon for gas, that's something that people see every day or every couple days when they fill up, their patience level is not going to be that prolonged. That's just my opinion. Even if the goals, you can sit in a long range view room and look at the threat of nuclear weapons in the Middle East, and I understand it more than most people. I do. But I got to tell you, people are short attention span, and they're looking at their pocketbooks and wallets at a time when things have been pretty damn expensive. And I just think that's a reality that the administration is going to have to weigh.
I think that's reasonable, Jack. I will say this: the U.S. is likely to look through this. Our Fed policy is much more rational than in Europe or the UK, where they're actually looking to hike rates. Mm-hmm. We will probably cut rates. The fact that they only look at inflation, and they look at it in a very short-term basis, and this is an inflationary spike that probably will be it will result in lower prices elsewhere. The Europeans and the Brits won't look through this. They'll just say, "Oh, higher prices. Oh, we've got to raise rates," and so that's their expectation.
Well,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish.
Well, I just say that that is, a silver lining is that it's quite likely that the Fed will be more aggressive in cutting rates, especially with the employment report. So they are going to look through this oil price spike.
Do you ever remember the late Robert Redford? There was a great movie a long time ago, but one of my favorites called 3 Days of the Condor and the CIA. Did you ever see that movie?
Oh yeah, great movie.
Do you remember a line?
Absolutely.
Do you remember a line near the end when the CIA operative, when Redford kind of blew the cover after his unit was taken out on oil and the projects where he said a good line to Redford in the movie. Americans don't care where they get their water or their oil from; they just want it. Yeah. And I got to tell you, the one thing the administration, if they ever could prove that we have, remember these lines for years we heard, we have less dependency on foreign oil. How many times did we hear that for decades in this country?
Yeah.
And if there's ever a time to produce more oil right now domestically, it is now, not next week. The problem is it takes time to ramp up. And I don't think people, I'll be honest with you, Doug, our society today, and it's not necessarily attractive or good, but I don't think Americans give a you-know-what. If they're getting oil or gas that's refined through the Strait of Hormuz or from South Dakota. They don't care. But when they go to fill up their pickup truck or their vehicle, their sedan or their SUV or their Mini, they want it to be about $2.75 a gallon, not $4 a gallon. They don't care where it comes from. And I think if this administration if this is going to take longer than we think in the Middle East, you better start lowering the price at the pump, because the price at the pump is usually an indicator of public opinion or not.
Well, you can bet that there's a lot of producers, Constellation Energy and any of the majors, that are locking in these prices in order to develop some of these marginal fields. You can bet that that's actually happening. That's what futures markets are there for. They're there so that people can lock in the price, so then they can develop, because then the dollars are there, the prices are there, and the cost to bring that field into the market is pretty much fixed.
Yep.
And so I would be very surprised if production doesn't ramp up. Starting next month, you'll start to see U.S. production ramping up, and we'll be export. I would love to see China dependent upon Alaskan oil rather than dependent upon the Gulf. That would also be a positive out of this.
If this stuff happens quickly, it buys time to finish the military goals in operation. If it's going to take a few months, I don't think the American people's patience is there. But that's me, Doug. Thank you, Doug.
Jack, you have a great rest of your week.
All right, we'll come back. Talk a little more about why the price at the pump is such a barometer of public opinion. Hey, Google. Hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an Age. Busy State House week right here at home. Anna Brown, top of the 10 o'clock. We'll be back in a moment.
Good Morning New Hampshire.
All right, Doug. Well, we'll see where a lot goes. Busy week at the State House, as I mentioned, going into the break. Anna Brown, Citizens Count, will be weighing in at the top of the 10 because, J-Dog, with all the stuff happening internationally, nationally, it's hard to remember what's going on here at home. That's why Anna's so great to have her pretty much one of our main contributors on the State House, because there's so much happening, and she'll keep us straight on that. Just going back to, I was just talking to someone who's not as wired in to the daily public policy, and I just on the business side, but wired in. But what I'm talking about here in the show, and I do know that the powers to be, at least in the White House, know this, but I've seen many, how do I say this? The reason why yours truly will talk a lot about history on this program, the great history of New Hampshire, the ratification of our state's constitution. We were really the first state to officially break away from the British. Amazing history, and history of World War II, history of the Vietnam War, escalation in Southeast Asia against communism, the Cuban Missile Crisis. I could keep going all day long. War in the Middle East, the war, to get Saddam Hussein out, getting bin Laden in Pakistan, Afghanistan, terrorism in Syria, Yemen. I could go on and on and on. Hezbollah, the Middle East, what happened in Israel, Palestinians, Hamas. The Middle East has always been a tinderbox of worry about how quickly things could get out of hand. And since we in Israel attacked Iran, took out the Ayatollah, so many of their command centers, the IDF reporting Israel's been continuing over the weekend, hitting sites, and we have pummeled and punished and hit Iran hard. And that's, I have no issue with that, given who they are and the terrorism. And I pointed out on my show a week ago, 30,000 U.S. soldiers have been maimed, killed, lost a leg, an eye, or an arm from IEDs that were made and built in Tehran. Number one exporters of IEDs the last couple decades on the war on terror. 30,000 soldiers. How many people have been killed by this Islamic State of Tehran and the Ayatollah and his gang, and now his son being named as the new supreme leader? I have no issue with taking out terrorists, because they'll take you out in a New York second if they could. They would take you out in a second in our way of life, and they'd obliterate Israel. I know all this stuff. I know all this. I'm acutely aware of it. I know who Hamas is, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. I remember the USS Cole. I mean, you go back to the bombing in Beirut, and I know what and who is behind 98% of the terrorism in the Middle East. I get that. And so does President Trump. And I give the administration credit for having the you-know-what to take that out. Here's the problem, though, and I'd say this respectfully to the president. The American people largely voted for Trump over Harris because of the economy. They felt the president now, President Trump, Donald Trump, then the candidate running again, would be better for the economy. And I've been saying on this show for months, and you've heard me say it, I think the midterm elections largely still will be, despite ICE, Homeland Security, Middle East, I think it's going to be the economy with independent voters, because they vote with their pocketbooks and wallets. And the challenge this administration has, in some commentary, is when you look at some of the headlines this Monday morning, March 9th, crude oil, prices of oil per barrel over $100 as war in the Middle East continues. That's a tough headline. A lot of people did not vote for this president because of getting us into wars. A lot of people voted for this president keeping us out of wars and helping the economy. And right now it's a little inverse. And I do, when you run for president, you can't blame anymore and point back. You got to lead. And we made a decision that has already been made a week ago Saturday to go and bomb and take out the Ayatollah and this regime the best you could. but it better be short-lived in all due respect, because the American people are not going to be real patient for a prolonged war in the Middle East, even if the long-term gain is there, because the American people do not have long-term views. And that's a reality. Again, I'm not saying that's good or bad. They don't have long-term views. And we've been at a time where we've been trying to get inflation down, 2.75% from 9%, trying to get groceries and the affordability of stuff. And when gas starts going up because of this effort in Iran so quickly, 50 cents, we're looking at maybe $4 a gallon in a couple of weeks if something's not done. The administration, there's a clock that's ticking. And the clock that's ticking is to get the Strait of Hormuz back safe again. And I would just say, get the military goals achieved as quickly as you can, as quickly and as harshly as you can, so that whatever's left standing running Tehran doesn't have the capability to blow up a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, doesn't have the capability to fire drones in Dubai, doesn't have the capability to ignite a nuclear bomb. Get that taken care of as fast as you can and get our folks out of there in the region. It doesn't have to mean boots in the ground, but if you start seeing $4 a gallon at the pump, I'm telling you right now, most people here at home, even if they don't know half of what I just said about the Middle East, are going to get real antsy and impatient and cantankerous real quick. And that's the balance this administration has. And I do think they're aware the last thing you want is boots in the ground in a prolonged war. But how many other administrations have said that before you send in more people to the region? Send in another 1,200. Send in another 5,000 to the region. All of a sudden, you get 50,000 military people in a region. And you may not want to use the word war, but war is war. And the clock is ticking. And I'm just going to point that out. Some commentary. Because the economy's been trying to really break out, and it won't break out if this is pulling it back. It's just a reality. 603-228-2080. Some commentary. Hey, Alexa. Hey, Google, play the Pulse of an H. Go to the Pulse of an H. Learn a lot more. Our daily poll question. Our interviews on demand. The interview with Senator Shaheen I had is still up there on demand from last week. Our fighter pilot, Tim Hafner, this morning, Durham, New Hampshire. He's become our Pulse of an H military fighter pilot expert. He had 10 years in the box, as they say. He was talking about how long it could take to hit these targets, to get all of them, because there was a lot there in Iran in terms of military capabilities and command centers, and might take a little bit longer than we want to take them out. So the clock is ticking on a lot of fronts. Hey, Google, hey, Alexa, play the Pulse of an H. Come back and get some State House updates.